Hello and welcome to Follow the Money. I am Su Jin Kim. Join us as we explore the tools and insights you need to jumpstart your financial journey. As government debt balloons to a record 16.68 trillion pesos, are our international tax treaties working for us or against us? With tax leakages and treaty abuse costing billions, is it time to renegotiate the rules? Joining us is a leading tax advocate for tax reform, the founder and CEO of the Asian consulting group, Mon Abrea. Welcome back to Follow the Money, Mon. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Before we examine the cracks in the system, how do current tax treaties benefit or harm the Filipino taxpayer?
Well, tax treaties in the first place are there to make sure that there will be no double taxation, to avoid taxing the same company or product or service twice in both countries. So for Filipino taxpayers, it's actually beneficial because it encourages transaction with foreign countries, because if there will be tax here and they will have to pay tax again in their country, then they would not want to transact with anybody in the Philippines. But right now, because we have tax treaty, then they are exempted from either the withholding tax or they are given a preferential rate. So instead of paying higher rate or double tax, then they avoid that because of the agreement, and that's what we call the tax treaty.
And then apparently there are loopholes to this tax treaty. Can you explain to us what treaty shopping is?
Well, honestly, it's like creating another company to benefit from the tax treaty wherein you should not actually be eligible. So like creating a shell company in another country so that you benefit from the tax treaty, but there's actually no transaction there. Then you make it appear that you transacted with that shell company, then report it to another company, sort of profit shifting, but at the same time abusing the loophole or taking advantage of the benefit of the tax treaty, which is actually only for the eligible ones.
Are there countries in particular, specific countries, where treaty shopping is more prevalent? The shell companies are more prevalent?
Well, honestly, tax havens are best place to go if you really want to avoid paying taxes. And for countries which are very, tax treaties are good, but abuses can happen if the government cannot monitor or implement it properly. But in the case of the Philippines, it's the other way around. They're too strict that even the eligible ones are hardly getting their benefits, or people just don't apply it anymore.
What do you mean by the Philippines is too strict when it comes to tax treaties?
A lot of countries, including Singapore, Thailand, Australia, they have an online process. In the Philippines, first, it's manual. Second, instead of making it automatic, there is a prior approval requirements. And I call it the 7-7 because you have to submit 7 requirements, the general requirements. Then there are another requirements for specific industries. So it, in a way, discourages countries from availing of it, or they just take the risk of not applying the taxes and then wait for a BIR audit. So either way, it, in a way, discourages those who are eligible to these tax treaties.
And then, Mon, many tax experts argue that unnecessary revenue losses are linked to the Philippines' overly generous treaty provisions, which you might not necessarily agree because you mentioned the Philippines was too strict. But then, in that point of view, would it be better to tighten these provisions more, or to focus first on better enforcement of the existing rules that we have?
I think it's always making sure that it's implemented properly, that we do not overly burden the taxpayers. Then at the same time, revisiting it or recalibrating it is always an option, similar to our tax incentives. It took us years before we were able to rationalize our fiscal incentives. But again, for me, tax treaties are good as long as they are implemented and monitored properly.
Then how can renegotiating tax treaties improve government revenue?
Tax treaties in a way give a certain exemption. So if tax treaties will be negotiated, there will be less exemption from withholding taxes. Like for instance, if you transact with a foreign company in the Philippines, there's a final tax of 25%, there's a final tax for VAT, but if the tax treaty will apply, then they will be exempted from certain taxes. So if there are less tax treaties, then this can be additional revenue. But again, it will also impact the Philippine companies who are transacting to the foreign corporations, because the benefit is mutual. So if we don't give any more those exemptions, then the Philippine companies will not also enjoy those exemptions in transacting with foreign countries.
Do you personally believe that closing tax loopholes and modernizing tax administration could generate enough revenue to prevent future tax hikes or like borrowing sprees? And can you walk us through how that might work if you think it will work?
Always, always. Ever since we started advocating for a genuine tax reform, we always say we don't need new taxes, we don't need higher taxes. We actually have to reduce and simplify our taxes, especially the system, to address the loopholes. We need to broaden the base rather than squeezing the MSMEs. So if I were to really reform it, the idea is to really digitalize or fully automate BIR. And I always say this, I wrote a paper, a strategy roadmap 15 years ago, that shows my age already, but that if we cannot fully automate BIR, might as well abolish BIR. That's a study that I made many years ago when I was still at the Bureau of Internal Revenue. And the reason being is, other than the corruption, which is still there, the bureaucratic processes are actually embedded in the system and in the laws. So we cannot just keep changing piece by piece. We need to really overhaul it and automate it. We cannot automate the filing, but there is no data analytics, or we cannot use the data to really determine who are paying and who are not paying. In fact, we are also proposing for a risk-based audit rather than the manual random that ends up burdening or harassing the small taxpayers, because the big ones are running for Congress, or they cannot audit them because they're very influential. But if it is automated, if it is risk-based, then whether you are a politician, you are in government, you are the multi-billionaire in this country, you can be assessed because you are not paying the right taxes.
You mentioned broadening the tax base, which I think is very interesting. Given our narrow tax base, how do you propose we increase collections? I know you mentioned automation, but would there be others that would work without hurting low-income earners or discouraging small businesses from formalizing their operations? Because that's the risk when you automate, you
Correct.
formalize.
Well, honestly, before we propose for a Magna Carta or a tax regime for MSMEs, that is to literally unburden them from the overly burdensome compliance requirements of the BIR, which the large corporations can handle or manage, but the MSMEs, they can't even afford to hire a consultant or a lawyer. So, but if we want to increase collection, then we have to make the audit risk-based. Rather than auditing the same companies, small companies every year, we have to come up with to check among the top 1% richest Filipinos, who among them are not paying taxes. That will be a huge collection. Or among these Chinese companies or government contractors who are not paying taxes. Then, rather than letting them keep getting contracts, then we have to collect and prosecute them. Because honestly, until now, we have not really prosecuted the big-time tax evaders and smugglers. They're still there. They're still growing their business. Some of them are even running for public office, and it's that kind of system tolerates or encourages more dishonesty, more corruption, because they know they can get away with it. So we need a system that is more transparent, more efficient. Digitalizing it is one, but we also need to lift the bank secrecy law because they're hiding behind the bank secrecy law.
Although I think the Bureau of Internal Revenue has been upping their game when it comes to running after the fake transactions. Do you recognize that, or do you think it's not enough? What is your take on
that's
it?
good. We always say that whatever helps us collect more taxes and run after tax violators or tax evaders is good. And we acknowledge the efforts of BIR. But what we're saying is there's more. We need to really make sure that we broaden the base and run after the big-time tax evaders rather than auditing the same small companies. Because at the end of the day, if you look at the annual reports of BIR for the last 10, 15 years, less than 3% is contributed by the BIR audit. And yet, that's the focus of BIR all year round. Audit, 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 audit. But the impact is 3%. So if you are the CEO, if you are the manager, you will have to ask, why am I allocating all my resources to collect less than 3% of my total collection? If I can just increase the voluntary collection, broaden the base, then from less than 3 trillion, maybe we can collect as much as Vietnam. Vietnam is collecting almost 20 trillion, while we are proud of our 2 trillion. less than 3. Diba? I mean, there's really, we cannot just increase the goal. We need to make sure BIR will be capacitated, will have a budget to digitalize everything, or abolish it and start a new one. And why do I keep saying it? Salary standardization is also another reason why we cannot improve the system. The salary is too low, it allows corruption, they rely on side income rather than focusing on just studying the system and running after the tax violators. So they end up accepting bribes or extorting from the small taxpayers. We are not addressing it. We just keep sugarcoating or coming up with new taxes, new policies. But it's like putting more water in a pail of water that is already have many holes. No matter how much water you put in, it ends up getting through the leakages. So we really need to make sure that we address the problem.
You mentioned twice today already the concept or the idea of abolishing BIR. Why is that?
Because sometimes if the corruption, the bureaucracy is really embedded in the system, the only way is to start anew. And my reference is actually what we did with Central Bank. So we abolished Central Bank and we established Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. So it's practically the same central bank, but with the new name, it comes with a new system, a better policy, and people are also retired and rehired. So you can really filter and improve everything. So it's an overhaul. So when I say abolish, it's not because BIR is the only one to be blamed. All of us, legislators failed to update our tax code many years ago, but at least recently we have seen so many developments, but still not enough. Collection is still less than 3 trillion. There are still more opportunities to improve and to make sure that we'll be more competitive without burdening the MSMEs and without harassing our foreign investors. Because we are doing the roadshow and a lot of feedback always goes back to they don't want to deal with our tax agency, it's all manual, they are being harassed, they have to pay so many consultants, and that's not the way we attract foreign investors. We want them to experience the ease of doing business, but also in ease of paying taxes and not being harassed by any government agency, including the BIR.
That's a very interesting take, to start from scratch, to abolish and then start from scratch.
Yeah, I hope I can get out of the studio after this. If we abolish BIR by Mon Abrea.
Mon Abrea headlines. But then can we also talk about government debt? The national government debt has now reached 16.68 trillion as of March. How alarming is this figure from a tax policy perspective? And what are the long-term implications for our fiscal health if we don't address the leakages in revenue?
Well, honestly, we are far from bankruptcy. Yeah, just to calm down our viewers, we're far from that. But it's alarming to the point that we are not significantly increasing our target collection. Collection has improved. For the record, it has improved. That's good. But have we maximized? Have we really collected enough compared to those that are going through all these leakages? I honestly believe there's still so much tax leakages. Corruption and bureaucracy is really slowing us down. To achieve that progress we're in, we can probably triple the target collection. But again, my point is not to increase the target collection now without reforming or overhauling the system, including the benefits of the revenuers or the employees of the BIR. You cannot disregard that. There are people working in the tax agency. And do you know that the BIR has what? Second or maybe the least, the lowest budget. Imagine that. They are tasked to collect more than 80% of the budget of the government, and the budget given to them is what? Maybe 10 billion? So
There's
I think
definitely a disparity.
Correct.
And we are just getting started. Follow the Money returns after a short break. You're still watching Follow the Money, and we are with Mon Abrea to talk of tax treaties, fiscal responsibility, and what's at risk if reforms don't catch up to the times. Now, Mon, we were talking earlier about domestic borrowings. Domestic borrowings comprises 68% of the debt stock. Are we becoming overly reliant on local sources of financing? And what does this mean for interest rates and investor confidence domestically?
Well, obviously, it shows that we are reliant on domestic borrowings. Well, it gives us a certain relief from foreign exchange whenever there's changes in the global economy. But in the end, I think it's clear that the government is still dependent on debt, both domestic and foreign, since we cannot significantly increase our tax collection.
And is our current debt level, you think, sustainable given our tax base?
In a short term, yes. In the long run, no. Again, the idea is first is also to rationalize our budget. We have a huge budget, and our collection is not even half of the budget. And second, part of the budget is always repayment of this debt. So imagine the cost that the future generation will have to carry. They haven't been born, and yet they have already loans to pay.
And then, how do you balance investor incentives with tax reforms?
Again, we always say that the incentives are given to investors who are, one, really helping our economy, providing more jobs, and ultimately, the return shows through more economic developments and in specific industries, particularly now on renewable energy, on semiconductor manufacturing. And incentives, in short, are investment. That's the cost that we have to pay so that we attract more foreign investors. But in the end, we get more employment, more opportunities for our kababayan, for Filipinos.
Mon, catching up with the times, how far behind are our tax laws? When was the last time they were updated, and how is tax avoidance exploited without consequence?
I think the last two administrations, the previous, under the Aquino administration, we started, but we were not able to really make so much reform. Surprisingly, during the Duterte administration, we made so much progress. The comprehensive tax reform program was initiated, but the fiscal rationalization was completed under this current administration. That's why we have created more. How late are we? Well, probably 2 decades before we were able to unlock it. Unfortunately, the personal income tax was left unchecked. Right now, we have the highest personal income tax at 35%. We really have to lower it because either we discourage individual taxpayers from being honest, or we are burdening our fixed income earners who are earning maybe above 5 or 8 million, but they have now to pay 35% versus multinational corporations who are either enjoying a zero income tax because of the tax incentives or paying less than 35%, which is right now at 25%. So there's already a 10% disparity between personal income tax versus corporate income tax. So I honestly urge our senators, our congressmen to look into this because we want our kababayans Filipinos to enjoy their hard-earned income.
So from 35%, what would you propose if it were up
25.
to you?
If the corporate income tax is 25, then logic dictates individuals should also be paying the same rate as the corporation. So that should also be 25.
And then you mentioned the Duterte administration. If we can go back to the administration right now, the Marcos administration paid a total of 183 billion pesos to creditors in the Philippines and abroad last March. This is 66% lower than the amount it settled a year ago. Why do you think that is?
Well, we should ask our economic managers. Maybe they are part of their fiscal policy is to reduce their repayment this year and adjust it to succeeding year when there will be more fiscal space for them. But again, whether you defer it or not, we will have to pay it, and there's an interest that will continue to accumulate.
And for our big question, ultimately, who benefits more from the current tax treaty regime that we have? Is it the Philippines and its taxpayers, or foreign investors with the resources to navigate and exploit the system, perhaps? And what should be done to shift the balance of it?
Honestly, I would say both, but maybe because the multinational corporations have more resources. They have made their structure more sophisticated. That's why we are proposing the Senate to already adopt the global minimum tax, because we want these multinational corporations to pay taxes in the Philippines. But this is separate from the tax treaty. The tax treaty is not making them pay double. But I think what the multinational corporations are guilty of is really the profit shifting. Like Facebook, Amazon, and these tech giants, they are not paying any taxes in the Philippines, and yet they're generating so much revenues in the Philippines because of Facebook ads, all these online transactions and all, but zero tax because they're not registered in the Philippines. So with the global minimum tax, slowly we can already get a share from their multi-billion revenues, and maybe at least 1% of the target of the OECD, because they're saying we can collect more than 200 billions in revenues. Imagine just 1% of that. That would help our government to fund our social services, our free education, to address poverty, and of course climate change.
200 billion pesos in revenues if we...
That is the target of OECD for all the countries, meaning to collect from the large multinational corporations. And the Philippines has not yet implemented the global minimum tax. So if we are to implement it, at least 1% of that, I'm just making an estimate, imagine at least 1% of that, that's huge. That's in dollars.
Oh, that's in dollars.
That's in dollars.
$1 billion.
Yes, so imagine if 1% of that will be collected by the Philippines, then we don't need to
the
run
revenue
after.
collection.
Correct. It's obviously a revenue collection, and we don't need to squeeze again to death our MSMEs. Because what I'm seeing is BIR is not bad. It's just that they're desperate to collect taxes to hit their targets. So they end up chasing after those wherein they can collect taxes. Why will you exert effort in collecting from somebody who will bring you to court and forevermore will not pay any taxes? So I think BIR is also being practical in trying to hit their targets.
After the record high collection last year, do you think the BIR will be able to hit its target for this year, which I think is 3.23 trillion?
I am positive because the economy is good. We have, despite what we're saying that there are tax treaties and incentives given to foreign investors, a lot of our domestic corporations are really making a good revenue, including our MSMEs, and that's good, including e-commerce, the digital economy. But again, what I'm saying is, versus what Vietnam is collecting, I think we have to really ask ourselves why our base is so narrow and why our target is only at 3 trillion versus almost 20 trillion, or I think 16, 17 trillion of Vietnam. So
perhaps we are definitely lagging with other ASEAN countries. Thank you so much, Mon Abrea, for sharing your time and insights this Thursday afternoon. Before we go, this thought from former U.S. Secretary of Labor, Robert Reich. If you want corporations to act differently, we have to force them to do so through laws that are fully enforced and through penalties higher than the economic benefits of thwarting the laws. And that's it for today's edition of Follow the Money. I am Su Jin Kim. Thanks for watching. Keep it here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News channel, always on top.